Imagine you're the leader of a sovereign nation. You have billions of dollars stored in the world's safest banks. You've played by the rules, followed the treaties, and kept your economy tied to the global system. Then, one Tuesday morning, you wake up and find that your money isn't yours anymore. You can't spend it. You can't move it. You can't even see it. With a single keystroke in a building 5,000 miles away, your entire national wealth has been deleted. We're taught that wars are won with steel and gunpowder. But in the 21st century, the most devastating weapon in the American arsenal isn't the F-35 or the nuclear submarine. It's a green piece of paper with Benjamin Franklin's face on it. And to understand how a currency becomes a cruise missile, you have to stop thinking of money as cash and start thinking of it as permission. Most people think that if a company in Brazil wants to buy oil from Saudi Arabia, they just swap reals for reals. But that's not how the world works. Almost every major international transaction, from oil to microchips, is priced and settled in US dollars. This is where it gets interesting. To move those dollars, banks use a messaging system called SWIFT. It's the Gmail of global finance. And while SWIFT is technically based in Belgium, it runs on dollar clearing rails that pass directly through New York. This is the exorbitant privilege. Because the world needs the dollar to function, the U.S. Treasury effectively sits at the world's only toll booth. If they decide you're no longer allowed to use that booth, your economy doesn't just slow down, it stops. This isn't a new theory. The U.S. figured this out decades ago. In 1956, Britain and France invaded Egypt to seize the Suez Canal. They thought they were still the masters of the world. President Eisenhower disagreed. He didn't send bombers to London. He did something much more surgical. He threatened to sell off the U.S. government's massive holdings of the British pound. He essentially threatened to bankrupt the British Empire overnight. Within days, the British military retreated in total humiliation. No shots were fired by the U.S., yet the Great in Great Britain was effectively retired that afternoon. The message was clear. If you don't have the dollar's blessing, you don't have a seat at the table. Fast forward to 2022. Russia invades Ukraine. The world expects a military response. Instead, the U.S. and its allies did something that had never been done to a G20 economy. They nuked Russia's bank account. Russia had spent a decade building a fortress economy, hoarding $300 billion in foreign reserves to protect themselves from sanctions. They thought that money was their shield. But those dollars weren't in Russia. They were digital entries in Western central banks. In 48 hours, the U.S. Treasury effectively unfriended the Russian central bank. Imagine having $300 billion and not being able to buy a single loaf of bread with it. That is the definition of a financial superpower. But the real power isn't just stopping you from using dollars. It's stopping everyone else from talking to you. This is called secondary sanctions. B. If a bank in Germany or a tech firm in Japan wants to do business with a sanctioned country like Iran, the U.S. Treasury gives them a very simple choice. You can trade with them, or you can trade with us. But you can't do both. It's not a fair fight. No CEO is going to risk losing access to the U.S. financial system, the lifeblood of their company, just to sell a few cars in Tehran. The U.S. doesn't need to invade your borders if it can simply build a digital wall around them. But here's the thing about weapons. The more you use them, the more your enemies, and even your friends, start looking for armor. For 80 years, the dollar was seen as a neutral tool, like the air we breathe or the internet we use. But by turning the dollar into a weapon, the U.S. has reminded the rest of the world that they are living on borrowed time and borrowed currency. China, Russia, India, and even Brazil are now frantically building their own plumbing. They're creating their own versions of SWIFT and trading in their own currencies. They realize that as long as they use the dollar, they are essentially giving Washington a kill switch for their own economies. But the irony is that the more the U.S. uses its financial nuclear option, the less powerful that option becomes. If the world stops using the dollar because they're afraid of it, the U.S. loses its ability to see, tax, and control global trade. We are entering an era where the world is splitting into two financial realities, one controlled by Washington and one designed specifically to hide from it. The US dollar won the 20th century without firing a shot. But in the 21st, the question isn't whether the dollar is a weapon. The question is, what happens when the rest of the world decides they'd rather be poor than be under your thumb? That's a question we might not want to know the answer to.